everybody, how you doing today? Holy cow. What a week I had, man. Just tired. Tired from Capital, right? Tired from Capital. The store that I work for is undergoing a lot of changes happening, and that is very destabilizing. Had to say farewell to some really good staff members. Also saw some staff members today who had previously gone. Anytime there's a transition, anytime you get new owners, there's always a transition, right? Where some people just decide that the new ownership is not where they want the business to be going. There's always a disagreement, always, about which direction the thing is going to go. And I think even beyond just a disagreement about where the business is going to go, I think there's just a general sense of that this is an opportunity to move on. That people, I think, especially young people, I think anybody under the age of 30, tends to see a change in ownership as it destabilizes people, and it puts inside of their consciousness this idea of like, wait, what am I doing here? Why am I here? What am I spending my time doing? I should go somewhere else. I should try something else. I should do something new. And seeing those people leave, right? It's difficult. It's difficult to see people leave, people you respect, people who you rely on, right? Several people who you rely on in the business. And it also puts a general sense of sort of malaise inside of the people who stay, right? Because the people who stay are staying not usually because they're like, oh, sweet, new ownership, hooray, but they're staying because they have to, right? They're staying because they have to, because they've gotten to an age where they can't really risk jumping around and moving around anymore. They can't really take those risks any longer. And I know for myself, in terms of what's going on in the capitalist world, I've got a pretty decent thing going on, and I don't want to upset that simply for the potential of something greater, right? Once again, in my view, capitalism doing its best to punish all sides, right? It drains out your youthful vigor. It drains out the people who think that there could be better opportunities, and it holds on to the people who are just clinging on for desperation. Radio Halifax, absolute pleasure to see you, bud. I hope you're doing well out there. Hope you guys are doing well out there in TikTok world, right? If you'd like to have a real conversation with an adult, you can come on over to YouTube. Compton, an absolute pleasure to see you, bud. I saw a thread about a pro-euthanasia commercial. Turns out to be an edgy clothing line commercial. Yeah, I mean, look, here's the hard reality about our society. I was thinking about this all weekend, especially last week. Last week there was a lot of people coming into the YouTube chat being like, oh, communism always fails. Communism never succeeds. Can you give me an example of a time communism succeeds? And I tried to use sort of the old arguments of like, sure, there are successes, the kind of Richard Wolffian arguments. Richard Wolff has good responses to the whole communism has never succeeded, communism never failed, and that's always been where I've kind of looked. But then I realized, like, oh yeah, you know what? Communism has always failed. It's failed to produce an upper class that creates a pedophile sex island. It fails to produce massive inequalities that divide the society and create a degenerate culture that worships eugenics, right? Like we're heading headfirst into a eugenics society again. It's happening, right? We're normalizing eugenics. Like it's for sure happening, right? You can see the chat, but not John, says Radio Halifax. I mean, video's gone. What about you, Compton? Can you see me? In any case, the eugenics system, the system of eugenics that is being erected here in Canada, it's the MAID system, the medically assisted dying system, has been 100% is a eugenics system that is absolutely being put forward by the wealthy and the powerful as a eugenics system. Like, I've seen enough to understand that that's the system that they are moving towards. that they're not interested in increasing the amount of funding for disabled people. They're not interested in increasing the amount of funding for people who are in a position of poverty. They're not interested in that. Like Doug Ford, for God's sakes, is explicitly stating that disabled people should go get jobs, right? And the reason why he's saying that is because they know that they're erecting a eugenics system. That eugenics system is the medically assisted dying program. There's been enough reporting on it now, and there's been enough people who have come forward and been like, no one wants to die, like no one wants to go forward with this, but the alternative that's being given to people is literally homelessness, right? That the choice for, if you're a disabled person and you live in, yet another failure of communism. Communists don't like to allow, and communist countries don't like to allow disabled people to die in the streets of homelessness, right? Only capitalist countries seem to enjoy that, and the capitalist solution, the capitalist success story, is to erect a eugenics system so that those people can choose to end their life with dignity. That this is this is our Nazi fascist society taking mercy on the downtrodden and the poor, right? While holding a book, holding a Bible that tells them to give their money to the poor. Well, the mercy that we give the poor and the disabled is a eugenics project, and that's what it is, and that's what it's become. And more, like you actually interact with the quote unquote conservatives that live in Canada, and more you just begin to realize, like, yeah, like it's always been this way. These people have always been sort of Nazi-based and eugenics-minded. They've always looked at the poor and the disabled with this view that we should just purge the society of them. They haven't gotten explicit. They're not ready yet, but it'll happen. It'll happen. You can't continue to foster this sort of culture in this society and not inevitably have someone come out of it who is just explicitly stating, yeah, we should round these people up. You can sort of see this beginning to happen with figures like Kanye West. You can sort of see this begin to happen where you have popular figures coming out against the traditional scapegoats, the traditional people who seem to always be the butt of the joke. Always seem to be the butt of the joke. And I think there's pretty good reasons for that, right? Like for example, the Jews, like there's not a lot of them. And that's all it really takes for these people, right? They're a small group of people and it's easy to pick on them. That's all. Like it's not very complicated, right? Like it's not very complicated. These guys stand up and say, oh, it's the Jews that run X or the Jews that run Y, right? And they can point at the small group of Jews that exist within whatever system that exists in, and scapegoat them, and then you have a purge, but maintain the system, right? So you maintain the system of wealth, and the wealth stays in the hands of the capitalists who own the system, right? And you earn yourself a lot of time doing that by being capitalists, because you distract the populace and you send the populace down this rabbit hole and traumatize the populace in this way, right? It's extremely common. It's extremely common. If you guys are watching here on TikTok, please be sure to like, please be sure to share, do the diamonds, whatever that is. Also, you guys like, share, subscribe, hit all the bells, hit all the whistles. Hope you guys are all doing really well out there. This is kind of a sleepy stream today because I am flipping exhausted. Capitalism is exhausting, and I'm an exhausted person. From Compton, profit, productive, driven eugenic systems like MAID is stupid eugenics. You don't filter out genetics by using wealth as a metric. Again, Musk is profoundly stupid. Look at him. Just look at him. Yeah. He isn't even an example of physical human ability. Yeah, like if your type of eugenics is based exclusively on how much, fake money dollars you have in a bank account somewhere, then you do end up with a profoundly stupid ruling class. Because the people who are handed wealth generationally, right? So the people who gain wealth are ruthless slavers who gain their wealth through the ruthless exploitation of the working class and minorities, right? Elon Musk's father owned emerald mines in apartheid South Africa, for God's sakes. Like, and so when that wealth passes on from, you know, the eugenics slaver to Elon Musk, like, it's not happening because Elon Musk is a super bright, smart kid. It's happening because his father was a slaver and has and clearly has imbued his son with a similar sort of ethos. Like, I love this tweet. Elon Musk literally looked at the world and decided the best thing he could do with $44 billion was to make sure Nazi voices were being heard. Right? Like, this is the hard truth about what's happening at Twitter. That Elon Musk is destroying the company, but let's say he doesn't. Right? Even if Elon Musk is completely successful, even if he achieves everything he set out to achieve, even if he's 100% slam dunk, this is exactly what I wanted to do. Well, his goal is to ensure that Nazis get a voice. Like, that's his stated agenda. And you can see it when he starts saying things like the Vox Populi stuff that he puts at the end of stuff. Like, it's like literally Roman salutes and Nazi shit that he's spreading around on Twitter all the time. And this is supposed to be the apex of our culture. This is supposed to be the very top. This is the person who has ascended the meritocracy and has stood atop it and is convincing everyone. Like, this is the person who we're supposed to be like, oh wow, I can't wait to be this guy. This is our Hercules. This is our Zeus. These are our champions. These are the people who we're supposed to say are the champions that are standing on the on the very tippy top. Dave says, I know this is an unpopular opinion, but the only people I see being actually allowed to talk about the Nazis in the ukes is on Twitter. I got to be careful talking about that subject because you're right. My channel gets completely kiboshed. Like, I got 41 viewers, and I bet you now that I've said that word, it'll drop down to 0. I bet. That's the hard truth. Right? Like, if you actually talk about what's going on overseas, if you actually talk about that situation on any of these social media, like, and it's by algorithm, for sure it is. Like, it's not a person, like, looking with their eyes and being like, oh, we're gonna, like, it's a robot. And if the robot comes along and is like, oh wow, you said you said you, right? You said that word, right? That's what they're clearing out. And I've seen it happen on this channel. I've seen this happen on Twitter. Sorry, not on Twitter, on TikTok. I've seen this happen in real time. So it's obviously occurring. And what that means is that if you do find people who have like a large group of people and they're able to talk about that subject, it's because they have this upswell of support and there's a genuine, real support going on in their community that's actively trying to push forward on that issue, right? Yeah, you got to call them Yahtzees. Exactly. Yahtzee. You're right, Compton. Like, Yahtzees. We have to create like a whole new language. We've got to create like a whole new language, because if you say the thing that they are, and of course this is dangerous for a very clear reason. And the reason why I say it's dangerous is not because, you know, Nazis are bad. Like, well, Nazis are bad, obviously, but like, how do you actually talk about these subjects? Like, how do you actually talk about these subjects? Sorry, guys, I'm having a little kerfuffle here with my stupid phone. Being a pain in the butt. How do you actually talk about these subjects? You know, if you can't actually use the word, if you can't actually say the word without being purged, right? How do you actually communicate about this? How do you keep it in the world, right? How do you ensure that your children know what these things are, and to be aware of them, and to be aware of them? Night Owl Conundrums. I love that name, dude. That's such a cool name. There are a lot of anti-COVID riots breaking out across China because their citizens do not like the new restrictions. It's strange. I mean, Night Owl, there's two things. Thing number one, be skeptical of things that our media says are happening in China, first of all. Like, always. There's no reason to believe every story you read that come out of China, right? Like, there's just like zero reason to believe. And to call them riots, like, oftentimes when you actually do any digging into any of these stories, it's literally like Radio Free Asia just telling a story, and Radio Free Asia is directly owned by the CIA, right? And they'll just tell stories. They'll just say whatever, right? Like they don't care what's real, or they just want you to have a dim view of China. And also, even if it is true to, and I actually believe, I'm surprised it took this long, right? I'm surprised it took this long. Like, China has been very hardline about keeping COVID out of its borders and has been very successful at doing so. But, people are people. They get restless. You can only keep people kind of in a state of stasis for so long before they they start to rebel to a certain degree. But I would put money on it. I would put money on it. And I haven't looked into this story at all, but I would put money on it that if I looked into this story and did some digging, you'd find out that, like, a bunch of Chinese citizens gathered with one sign that said, "We don't like these COVID policies so much," right? Or they, like, showed up at their representative's place and was like, these COVID things are causing us more problems. We would like to move forward from this. And the CIA is grabbing a hold of it and being like, "Riots in China! Oh my God, it's a catastrophe! The place is burning down because people had a conversation." That's extremely common. Like, that's extremely common. And I mean, and at the end of the day, I'm kind of like, so what? So what if they did? Like, what? You think that shit didn't happen in America? You think? It only took them fucking 3 years. Right? Like, in America, we literally were like, you want to put a mask on my face? If you put a mask on my face, then I'm gonna throw a fit in a Walmart. My freedoms, we gotta get a bunch of trucks together. Right? So, like, it's always a compare and contrast, dude. And when you do the compare and contrast, it's like, oh no, a bunch of people were like, "Oh, this COVID thing, I don't know." Eric, good to see you, bud. I haven't seen you around, bud. Good to see you, Eric. And good to see you too, Dave. I don't know if I actually said hello. The fact that every mainstream media outlet is trying to sell the narrative that Musk bad is enough for me to cut him a lot of slack. Dave, I know, that's the trick, eh? That's the trick, right? Like, I do hate Elon Musk, but I hate the mainstream media more. And if the mainstream media hates Elon Musk, then that actually kind of makes me like him a little bit. I don't really... Dude, it's complete... It's just chaos. That's all. It's just chaos. Right? They're all assholes. And they're all assholes sniping at each other being assholes. Like, don't take sides. Just don't take sides. Like, they're all rats on a sinking ship, screaming about how we saved this place, although none of them know how to navigate, right? Like, it's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, and Ligon Disease is a great source for this because Ligon Disease likes to keep his finger on the pulse. And to respond to the China thing, it's just Shanghai, and they are not popular. Yeah, I mean, and again, I think my statement is that even if this group is showing up and being disruptive, like, I'm blown away that it took this long, right? Like, we were immediately doing it. Like, here in the West, we literally were like, "You want me to put a mask on? Get the trucks, Bertha, we gotta get to Ottawa, it's time to do the Freedom Convoy, ho ho, ho ho." We were doing that straight away. So... And again, I bet you if I watched footage of it, it'd be a bunch of people being like, "We don't like this." And, like, bowing at one another, being very polite. Content also considered the NED isn't present in every potentially serious protest. They even find real problems and turn them into issues about a government instead of a policy or rule. I mean, there is that also, right? Like Content is sort of raising, unless I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, but, like, sometimes people have, like, legitimate concerns. Like, I think what's happening in Iran is a good case of this, where there is a people who are having a legitimate tiff with their government and really rising up and trying to say, hey, we think that we should get a new system and all that kind of stuff. And, like, the CIA and the NED and all those groups are definitely involved in it, right? They're definitely over there. Are they responsible for it? No. But are they attempting to manipulate the situation for their benefit? Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Dave says everything that Musk is doing, though, is accelerating the technological obsolescence of this BS system. Yeah, I mean, Twitter is probably over, right? Like, I don't know how it recovers. It seems to have lost its credibility, and it, like, people will say, like, well, more people are engaging it than ever, and I'm like, yeah, like, so when you burn a building down, lots of people show up to look at it, right? Doesn't mean the building's working, right? Eric says there is a New York Times article that came out yesterday where they openly admit how bad Buchmann Station is for you. I've seen numbers that they're losing a lot of money. Yeah, I mean, it's no, it's not a good situation. But again, it's so tough to parse the news on that because all sides are incentivized to lie. I think that's the thing. I've always said that about this conflict, is that unless there's something that all sides agree to, it's very difficult to, like, create clear lines and create clear positions and clear ideas. I think the thing that I have seen recently about that is that high-level people within the United States government have now come out and said, look, the territory that has been taken is taken. We're not going to get that back. And I think that like we're talking like 4-star generals. Like we're not talking low-level shit here. Like we're not talking hypothesis speculation shit. We're talking about the people who actually make decisions are going to Congress, are going to the Senate and being like, yeah, like maybe we can get certain territorial gains and certain kind of things on the borders, but we're never going to get in there. Like it's just not going to happen that way. And to me, I really think that it's just a continuation of the United States strategy to just completely destroy and completely decimate the area and the region, right? Yeah, I was up at 500 viewers there, start talking about this subject. We're down to 89 now. It happens in real time, guys. I won't be too surprised to watch this TikTok thing die right out now. I'm even trying to fake it. And it's just going to die right out. I bet. Anyway. Yeah, I'm sure there's no protest being fenced in your neighborhood or arbitrarily trained in quarantine when you visit Disney. I'm sure those citizens are outliers and the CIA is exaggerating. Yep, CR Strifey nailing it, man. CR Strifey nailing it. Like, it's how do you... And I think that's likely the case, right? It's likely the case. Take that picture off your screen? Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not worried about YouTube. It's not YouTube I'm worried about. It's the ticks. It's the ticky-talk. TikTok seems much more sensitive than YouTube on this issue. But you're right. Let's get rid of that. This is a great one that I'm definitely going to read, right? This is about Elon Musk, and it's from an intern. I was an intern at SpaceX years ago, back when it was a much smaller company. After Elon got hair plugs, but before his cult of personality was in full swing. I have some insight to offer here. Back when I was at SpaceX, Elon was basically a child king. He was an important figurehead who provided the company with the money, power, and PR, but he didn't have any knowledge or, frankly, maturity to handle day-to-day decision-making, and everybody knew that. He was surrounded by people whose job was, essentially, to manipulate him into making good decisions. Managing Elon was a huge part of the company culture. Even I, as a lowly intern, would hear people talking about it openly in meetings. People knew how to present ideas in a way that would resonate with him, and they knew how to creatively reinterpret or ignore his many insane demands. And they even knew how to stage manage parts of the physical office space so that it would appeal to Elon. The funniest example of stage management I can remember is this dude on the IT security team. He had a script running in a terminal on one of his monitors that would output random garbage matrix style, so that it always looked like he was doing things in front of his desk when people walked by his desk. Second funniest was all the people I saw playing World of Warcraft at their desks after 5 p.m., who did it in the office just to give the appearance that they were working late. People were willing to do that at SpaceX because Elon was giving them the money and hype to get into outer space, a mission people cared deeply about. The company also grew with and around Elon. There were layers of management between individual employees and Elon, and those managers were experienced managers of Elon. Again, I cannot stress enough how much of the company culture was oriented around managing this one guy. Twitter has neither of those things going for it. There is no company culture or internal structure around the problem of managing Elon Musk. And I think for the first time, we're seeing what happens when people actually take that man seriously and at face value. Worse, they're doing this little experiment after this man has had decades of success at companies that dedicated significant resources to protecting themselves from him, and he's too narcissistic to realize it. I love it. I love it. From Eric, I do know that the U.S. aid packages are getting... Oh, yeah, dude, you want to keep talking about this. No, we're going to move on, bud. So that's how you're going to be. Hangs up phone. Hey, guys, I guess that's it. Yeah, dude. People are really still on it, eh? I'm really impressed. People care more about the death of Ronnie McNutt than they do about the fucking, like, real serious shit. It's pretty embarrassing, frankly. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the bells, hit the whistles, hit the things, hit the stuff, right? The diamonds, right? Maybe give a think about donating. Hit the stuff. Do all the things. Spread the good word. Let people know. Let people know. Communism is well alive. The specter haunts North America. Whoa. I just thought that this tweet was really wonderful, right? Please talk about the protests in China. Isaac, I already did. I think that it is overblown. That's all. Like, I'm sure that there are protests in China. Like, I'm sure that that's the truth. But I'm sure that they are not, like, oh no, right? Like, oh no, civilization has protests, right? Civilization has protests. Oh. Like, I just think it's a non-story, right? Burn Nod says hi. Good morning, Vietnam. That's a great movie, actually, right? Time Told. Greeting, comrades. I came over from TikTok. Glad to see you, Time Told. Hope you're here to engage in a beautiful way. Enjoying the stream. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Please be sure to like it. I don't know how to pronounce your name, dude. QTYA. Just going to say cutie. Right? Cutie. There you go. We did it. I really want to hear why you became a communist. Honestly, Cutie, the reason why I began calling myself a communist was because people called me a communist. That I literally would just say, why are there homeless people? Why does poverty exist? And I would be called a communist. And so I began investigating communism because people kept calling me a communist. Read the Communist Manifesto, right? You read the works of Engels. You start getting involved more and more in this. I also got really interested. I was always interested in economics, not in a professional level, but just so you read the words of Adam Smith. Like, you read these works, right? And you see very clearly that people like Karl Marx are a continuation of Adam Smith, and that basically everything we know about Adam Smith is essentially bullshit. Like, go read his stuff. It's exactly the same about what's happened with Jesus Christ, right? Jesus Christ has become an inverted figure. Adam Smith, too, has become an inverted figure. Like, we are incapable of telling the truth about our own culture in Western culture. Like, we've lost a complete credibility. And so I become a communist. And the nail in the coffin, the nail in the coffin for me was when Jordan Peterson started to talk shit about communism. And that was the moment when I really ramped up my research and I really went whole hog on it. And that was the moment when I realized, like, yeah, I've always been a communist, right? Because fundamentally, I think that there should not be homelessness, there should not be poverty, that we should actually care about one another on an egalitarian sort of a level. And not only that, but that communist cultures have actually been successful at doing just that. And then when you just do a straight up compare and contrast, because it is a compare and contrast, right? You're never going to get perfection. Humans exist, right? So that's never going to happen. So it's a compare and contrast. And if you take the absolute worst possible narratives, the propaganda surrounding communism, and you compare it to what the capitalists agree happened in capitalist society, communists still win. So if you take your absolute most dead-brained CIA propaganda shit that you've ever heard about communism, and you put it up against literally what you can see on the day-to-day news about what capitalist societies have done, communists walk away with that huge W. It's not close either. It's not close. And the more and more I learn, and the more I see, and the more I discover, the more and more I see that it's not a close race. Like it's I don't see it as a struggle. Like, to me, I'm at a point now where I see it as more of an inevitability than anything. That the capitalist society is incapable of sustaining and maintaining itself. That it is designed to collapse. It is designed and structured to tear itself apart. That it can't do anything else. It certainly can't solve problems, right? The problems that capitalism is trying to solve is, how do we make more money? And if that means build bombs, blow places up, they'll do it. And if that means build bombs and give weapons to your own citizens and have them kill each other, they'll do it, right? And it's just in the pursuit of this God. And that's what it is. It's a God. The God of money. The God of profit. Right, and Nietzsche said that we killed God, and we've become something of a secular society. We're not really a Christian society anymore, and we replaced all that with just money. That's what we've done. Manny7500 asks the CIA propaganda question that all sort of low-level thinkers ask. Okay, name one successful communist country with freedom of speech. Yeah, you know what, dude? You're absolutely right. The communists have never successfully had a Jeffrey Epstein pedophile island. The communists have never had a successful Elon Musk, right? We've never had a successful grifter who entranced the country in communist countries. You're right. Like, it's a compare and contrast, bro. And look at what you're defending. Like, really look at what you're defending. Like, and name a successful communist country? Okay. How about when the Soviets beat the Nazis? Or were the first people into space? Like, and like, you think that America has freedom of speech? I think that's a joke. I think that's a total joke. Go ask people like Chris Hedges what he thinks about fucking freedom of speech. Go ask Edward Snowden, Julian Assange. Go ask Julian Assange what freedom of speech looks like in America. Right? Go ask the primarily black prison population what they think of freedom of speech in America. Like, it's a total fucking joke. Right? Like, yeah, China doesn't allow, like, Fox News and Nazis to spew bullshit into the airways. Right? Yeah. Real freedom of speech going on there. Freedom! Yeah. It's dumb, all right. Cutie says, I agree with most of the things you said. I see you're a reasonable guy. That's a blessing. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. I myself is economically socialist, but other than that, I'm pretty far to the right. You know, Cutie, I think that, so basically what you just said to me, right, is economically you prefer egalitarianism and all of this, but there is a, you've got a right inclination. I think my suggestion to you is start seeing yourself in other people. That other people, you have a lot more in common with other people than you think, right? You've got a lot more people a lot more in common, and everybody has a piece of each other inside of them, and when you look at a person that perhaps you don't think, you know, when you look at someone and you think less of them for what you think they are, that's probably not true. That's probably not true. And there's probably something going on in your own past that you're holding on to, and you perhaps don't have to do it. Right? Fart Sniffer 78, my friend. What a blessing. What a blessing to see you, bud. And a salute to you, sir. Yeah, Compton said, freedom of speech isn't real. There is speech of power and speech that will be tolerated by power. That applies to all states, exactly. Manny7500 doubling down on CIA propaganda. They've also never had human rights. Yeah, wank, 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 right? Yeah, because lifting 800 million people out of poverty, right? Real human rights violation going on there. If you love communism, then move. Yeah, the childish sort of a quasi-genocidal sentiment. People I disagree with should be relocated, right? Quasi-genocidal. Don't change our ways that work. Don't change our ways that work. Literally, this is just vomit. Like, this is literally CIA vomit, dude. Do you actually have a thought in your mind? Because it doesn't look like, bro. Like, it looks like the CIA crammed a bunch of thoughts in your head, and now you're being discussed. Like, we're having an adult conversation, or I'm attempting to have an adult conversation. Yeah, like, and also, Manny, you are embarrassing yourself, dude. Like, you're embarrassing yourself. Like you not a good look, bro. Not a good look. Like, it's almost every communist country has collapsed within 100 years. Yeah, like the CIA exists and the American government does a lot. Like, they bombed the shit out of Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos and North Korea to make sure that would happen, right? And they lost, right? That's the other thing, right? Like, you're sitting here talking about how communist countries have collapsed. It's like, not really. Like, America lost. America went overseas to try to stop the staunch of communism. They dropped a lot of bombs and set people back a generation or two, but they lost, right? America lost that war. Like, America has never won a war against communism, right? Capitalism has never won a war against communism. It's never happened. The only time that we transferred over, yeah, the Soviet Union, right? But that wasn't a collapse. That was an abandonment. That the leadership of the Soviet Union moved away from communism and privatized the system legislatively. So maybe stop listening to the CIA, Manny. Like, straight up. Like, just stop listening to the CIA. Because when you actually look at what happened, the Soviet Union didn't collapse. It wasn't, communism didn't get an internal contradiction, right? No, that's literally not what happens, Manny. Like, straight up not what happens. Like, it was abandoned because the leadership post-Stalin wanted to integrate itself into the neoliberal project in the hope to gain status with the European and Western nations, right? Which failed, ultimately, and we see that now. But that was the goal. And it was stated. It was pretty clearly stated, right? And A. Leon first is coming in with just like the overhead right, as far as I'm concerned, right? Like, if communism was so unstable and is doomed to collapse on its own, why does America spend billions of dollars in anti-communist policies, right? Like, that's the that's the contradiction of your position, Manny, that you can't overcome. Like, if communism is so destined to fail, and it fails naturally on its own with no outside interference, right? Well, then why are we spending billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars to destroy these countries, right? Like, why are we doing that? What if it collapses on its own, right? Unless your claim is that we're not. Fuck the CIA, I rarely watch the news. I mean, these are all CIA talking points, dude. Like, black and white. So, something's going on. In Soviet countries, the amount of people who die is insane. If they say leader is bad, me and my family died. Manny, dude, like, embarrassing. Just straight up, dude. Like, it's pretty embarrassing. Stats, you want to take, if you're in top chat, you want to switch over to live chat. That's what's happening there, bud. What are you saying, Eric, here? Sorry, dude. Have you seen the countless content creators who continually complain about YouTube policy, like Matt Pat, who isn't political at all? I mean, I think that YouTube is sort of struggling, right? Like, right now. It doesn't really, like, I think TikTok has really messed up YouTube. It doesn't know what to do. Like, that's really the truth. I think that YouTube is basically, like, the YouTube Shorts is essentially TikTok. They're trying to struggle. They're trying to do that kind of stuff. And I just don't know, like, their advertising model's not very strong anymore, because it's basically based on, like, people falling asleep or not hitting the skip button, which I'm just like, what the fuck do you think, right? And so they're trying to figure out how to transition and do a lot of stuff. And my complaint about what YouTube has done is they have prioritized known grifters, right? Like the quote unquote mainstream, like CNN, Fox, these things, they've gotten prioritized, and they've become considered respectable, when the truth is that, like, these people are essentially bought by CIA assets. They're not really interesting or interested, right? So, and those people get prioritized. Respect, bud. Basic human respect. Very simple. It's easy to do. It's easier, in fact. I hope you feel better, bud. I hope you do better in your life. From Kea, the pissed off Canadian. Good to see you, by the way. CIA and Western American interventions cause it to fail. Why do we keep embargoed on Cuba? Yeah. If it's so bad, why not let it fail on its own? Yeah, exactly. And like, the reason why, and they stated it. It's just the stated reason. The stated reason is the stated overt reason why people went to Vietnam to destroy it was to staunch the spread of communism, right? The McCarthy era, for God's sakes. Like, literally ruining people's careers, ruining people's lives because they were involved in a political organization and a political movement, right? Like, to pretend like these organizations don't exist, to pretend as though these organizations don't exist. And to answer your question, Polar Game, it's because I want my own country to succeed, right? That's why. I want my own country to succeed. I take a look at what's going on across the world and what's happened historically, and I think to myself, yeah, our society could improve as well. We could do a lot better. And when you finally get over the propaganda that comes out of CSIS and out of the CIA, and there's obvious reasons why that propaganda exists. Like, who are the losers if communism wins in North America? Well, it's obviously, like, the investors and the shareholders. They're highly incentivized to lie to you about what's happening in places like China, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, or even in the Soviet Union. They're highly, highly, highly incentivized to lie to people, right? And to pretend like they're not. Like, that's the thing that blows me away about people like Manny and people like this bad boy and all this kind of stuff, is that they come in here and they pretend as though there isn't a group who are highly incentivized to lie. You know, that's the thing that's so shocking to me about these conversations that I have. Like, it's obviously in the interests of, and not just the CIA, it's like in the interests of Bill Gates, it's in the interests of Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Galen Weston and David Thompson and the entire political apparatus that they own. It's completely in all of their self-interest to lie to you about the major successes that have happened in communist countries, right? It's highly in their interest. And if you don't think that, then I don't think you're capable of commenting rationally on the subject. Like, period. Like, and I'm not trying to say that as a dismissive diss, but as just like a factual reality. Like, you're not acknowledging that there is this entire, like, $100 billion organization that whose very existence is to attempt to destroy this idea, right? Like, the CIA is created in order to destroy communism. That's what it was created for under Truman, right? And you have major organizations like NATO were designed to destroy communist countries, and, like, literally they go on enormous purges of their own country through the McCarthy period, right? And they go through the CIA literally, like, goes through assassinations and overthrows. Like, what happened in Libya, for example. Like, Libya is a great example of what has happened even in the modern era. The destruction of the strongest economy on the African continent, and flipping it into a literal slave state, right? A literal slave state. And, Manny, I don't mind you coming in with your CIA stuff, but I expect basic human dignity and respect. Like, if you're going to speak this way, we don't need to keep you around, okay, bud? And honestly, yeah, I'm good. Like, if you're so unintelligent that you don't know how to speak to people with respect, I don't need to keep you around. It's that simple. Right? Like, if your mom didn't teach you basic manners, then I don't need to have you around. You're not intelligent enough to talk to us. Communism is a threat to capitalist nations because they can become powerhouses because they subordinate individual freedom to the state. Communism is a threat to capital because they can become powerhouses because they subordinate individual freedoms to the state. Well, I mean, they organize, right? And they create structures that they actually trust. I think that's a big part of it. that if you take a look at the polling data that comes out of Harvard in regards to what's going on in China, the people of China are more or less happy with what's going on in China, right? And over time, because it was a 17-year study, over time they became more happy, right? They became more happy. So it just seems to me like the trusting of the institutions that you interact with, and that those institutions are actually connected to anything, right? Yeah, I think you're right, Chibi. Like, just to say to you, I hope you have a great day too. If you're bouncing, yeah. Comment nothing apart from the conversation. I want to say TikTok chat's the proof of how people could be so unrespectful. Yeah, like it's pretty astounding. It's why I don't interact with the chat, the TikTok chat. It's just trash. Like, it really is. Like, if you're watching on TikTok and you think you can have an adult conversation and hang out with the adults, you come on over to YouTube. But TikTok chat is pretty gross. Yeah, I mean, I get this comment a lot, Drukovsky, right? You lived in quote-unquote communist Romania in the 1980s. Yeah, of course it was, because it was like the collapse or the decline of the communist state, right? Like, you literally lived through the abandonment of the project. That's what I'm talking about. Like, when I talk about communism, I talk about the heyday of communism, when they are actually believing in communism. And I think it's worthwhile to say to someone like yourself that you're stumbling into my major critique of what happened in the Soviet Union and what happened in the Eastern Bloc, which is that the Soviets failed to build institutional power, that they weren't able to pass the baton from one generation of people to another and keep the project alive. That really, I think, is more or less what happened in the Soviet Union. And please explain how communism is supposed to be good when you never had to live under it. Because your personal experience, like this is something that I think everybody's got to understand. I don't take the individualist position, right? Like, your individualist experience and my individualist experience isn't enough. And there are major successes that are happening in the world, like with Marxist principles and Marxist ideas. Like, they're obviously happening, and at this point, it is obvious. And it sounds to me like you've had I really don't want to. I especially get this way when I talk to people who lived in the Eastern Bloc in the 80s, like yourself. And I'm really trying to not be disrespectful to you. And I mean you no harm. I just want you to explain it. Oh yeah, great. I'm glad to hear that, bud. So my feeling is that the experience you had was completely genuine. That you were experiencing the abandonment of communism. That you weren't experiencing communism. You were experiencing its abandonment. And that the failing of the Soviet Union, the true critique of the Soviet Union, is that they really failed to create institutional strength to make it from one generation to the next. That it went from Lenin to Stalin with no small internal turmoil, right? Like, the Trotsky-Stalin fight was real, right? Was real, and that should have been a real signal to the Soviets. And it certainly was a signal to lots of other people to be like, oh, we should not do this. We should try to get away from that kind of thing. And that the intergenerational passing of the baton becomes something centrally crucial to focus on. Because if you don't make that transition successfully, capitalists will come in and the project will be abandoned. We saw that happen. Right? We saw that happen. I mean, ideologies will never be perfect. Of course, people are involved. Absolutely, Polar. That's completely the truth. Right? Chaos says, I've lived under capitalism. I use food banks to survive. I've had a disability, get offered maid instead of help. Yep. Like, that's the lived reality of what's happening in Canada to our weakest citizens. And it would be easy to resolve. Like, that's the most embarrassing part, is that I think it would be easy to resolve. But we don't want to confront the capitalists. Weehot says there was no abandoning. The minorities were suppressed by Russians under communism, blah, blah, blah. Nonsense. Just garbage. You're embarrassing yourself, bud. It's very simple. I live in capitalism. My rent is going up to the point where I can't afford it, even with 2 jobs. Yeah. Capitalism is bad, communism worse. I think I'm just going to agree to disagree with you on that one, Polar. I mean, show me Jeffrey Epstein's sex island. under communism? Like show me the this degree of inequality that has happened. Like the Chinese are literally eliminating poverty and we're increasing it. Like the Chinese are literally eliminating drug epidemics in their society and we're spreading them. Like I just honestly, dude, I just don't think you know anything. Like really, I just don't think you know anything. I think you're just making statements because that's what you've always been told by like your parents. And I don't take that seriously. Dysania. I love your name and I love your icon. I hope this is a beautiful comment. Do you know why they couldn't pass the torch, as you say? Because they oppressed everybody there, blah, blah, blah. Nonsense as usual. Like, this is the typical talking point that if you know that the bullshit about the Soviets killing a bunch of people is nonsense, the next thing is oppression, right? You usually get talking about the purges, as if there wasn't political assassinations, as if there wasn't that stuff going on, right? At the end of the day, it's the same kind of story, right? If you don't know anything about the subject, you can say what you like about it. Hey, Anemone, how you doing? Fart Sniffer 78, bro. Again, dude, you gotta do something about that name, bro. You gotta do something about that name. How would a rich or a poor country become communist? What if the majority of the country doesn't want communism? Would their country not want communism act in the best interests of the people? I mean, the majority of the country would have to be going for it, right? Like in all cases, when communism comes into a country, it is through struggle and a struggle of the proletariat, struggle of the workers, right? That the workers rise up and no longer participate in the system of capital. And so you can't have a small group of elites just demand it happen, right? It's just not how it's going to go. And it is going to take like a mass uprising from the citizenry. And that's going to be met with extreme violence. The capitalist system is absolutely arming itself in preparation for such a thing. They're absolutely preparing for it. Like they're getting ready for the Civil War. Like like if you were to treat the American police forces like a military, they would be the third most funded military on the planet. That you have America is number one, right? By a lot is number one. The next is China, because China is attempting to defend itself from America right now. And then number three would be the police, the American police force. So like the country's at war with itself. And that's another like very obvious thing that is certainly happening. You got to kind of be in Sleepy Town to think that America is not in a state of war with itself. And the ruling class and the ruling system is going to do everything it can to destroy any revolutionary potential that exists in the country. If that means they need to get everybody hooked on opioids, they'll do it. If that means they need to arm everybody and pit white people against black people, they'll do it. Right? There is no depth of depravity that the ruling class will not attempt to plunge the society into. There's no limit to it. Right? There's no limit to it. And so the only way that any society has ever managed to even attempt, forget about succeed, but even attempt, is if the working class comes together on working class lines, puts aside identity politics, puts aside the old divides that benefit the ruling class, and organize along class lines and seek to overthrow the bourgeoisie or the owners, right? And that's the way it would actually happen. But you would never achieve it right now in these conditions because huge sections of the populace would not accept it. Like you can't just overthrow you can't just walk into the council chambers in Ottawa and be like, yeah, we own the place now. Like Alberta would immediately secede. It would probably destroy the country. It pays to remember that like most of the time when these sorts of things happen, the countries that they happen to are either much smaller or are literally overthrowing kings, right? Like when the Soviet Union overthrows its ruling class, it's literally overthrowing monarchs, right? So it's the revolutions and the overthrows that happen here in North America it'll look a lot different. I actually think that America will likely go through a period of balkanization first, and that sort of revolutionary energy will take hold in in individual states. That's what I expect to see. I don't think the federal government maintains its position for much longer. Within my lifetime, it could begin happening. And I just don't, it's not even attempting to prevent it. Like, you cannot keep a country together without unifying projects. You just can't. It's just not possible, right? Like, this is something that, like, John A. Macdonald, the first Prime Minister of Canada, knew and stated explicitly. Like, he understood. The reason why they built the Trans-Canada Highway was because it was a unifying project. The reason why they built the Trans-Canada and the interstate highway system in the United States is because it's a unifying project. And if you're not constantly building unifying projects, you're not trying to get the populace together and unified as a single unit, you just can't do it. It just doesn't work. The Americans are trying to pretend as though they can do it with the military, and that's why the society is becoming inundated with military propaganda called Marvel movies, right? And everybody's supposed to just be like rah-rah military, but it doesn't work. It just doesn't work that way, right? You can't use a destructive force to build something. And so I think that America, if it doesn't turn the corner, which it won't, but let's say it, so if it doesn't, like, you take a look at a place like California, you take a look at a place like Texas, you take a look at most of the South, and it doesn't take a genius to figure out that eventually people are going to go, why am I spending this much money on the federal government and getting literally nothing back, right? Literally nothing back. So it's just a matter of time, if you ask me. Polar, I would really like to debate with you. I don't really speak English. I mean, I don't know, Polar. I don't really go for debate bro stuff. Like, most of the debate bro stuff I see is just one person who knows something and the other person who doesn't. So I don't really waste too much time on it. Have you been offered death as a response to your life options, Polar? Oh, you have? How interesting. Communism would never work because people are not perfect and will always be evil people in the world that will take advantage of it, just like capitalism. Yeah, I mean, Desania, this is an interesting point that you're bringing up. It's something I talk about a lot with China, right? But China has actually managed to build something, like, remember how I was critiquing the Soviet Union, that they failed to build the institutional support to actually pass the baton through generations. Well, China has actually done it, right? The passing of the baton from Mao to Deng to Xi is observable. It's very clear. You can absolutely see that they have successfully managed to pass the baton. They've managed to keep capitalists out of the political system. They act like capitalists are corrupt and will corrupt the political system. They're not allowing capitalists into the system the way the Soviet Union and the Soviets did. They're not tricking themselves into believing that there will be some kind of integration into the capitalist system, that they use the capitalist system as a fire, right? As a fire. That they see fire as useful. They would prefer to move away from fire as a way to heat their home, but until they actually have that built, they're not going to put the fire out. But they're going to keep it in a fireplace, and they're going to interact with it with tools and be very careful, because they know what fire can do. Just take a look at what it's done to America. As Americans let the fire out of the fireplace and just let it all over the place. Right? The fire will decide, right? Let the free market decide. Chaos will reign. And but this concern, right? So right now it's working for China. And that's obvious. Like, I think you gotta really, really have a very, like, you gotta really have a dim view of what's going on around you to think that it's not, that Chinese society is not working, right? It's obviously working. And, but should it get corrupted, right? Which is possible, it'll go really bad. It'll go really bad, because any force that gets in there and actually manages to corrupt that system, that is actively working to rout out corruption and rout out that kind of stuff, it'll go really, really gnarly, really, really fast. And I try to keep my eye on it, and I try to pay attention, because I'm not Pollyannish about this. I'm not naive, right? Like, if China starts acting the way the Americans act, I'll for sure critique them. Right? I'll for sure critique them on that. As soon as there's a Jeffrey Epstein pedophile island, as soon as they have private citizens wasting money shooting rockets at space, right? As soon as they have private military forces going around the globe, as soon as they have CIA death squads going into other nations and killing children in the street, yeah, I'll talk about it, for sure. But they don't, so they have other things going on. Other things that are much more exciting and interesting. Things like the Belt and Road Initiative, which is just absolutely a beautiful thing that they're doing. Beautiful is the word that I would use to describe it. If we were doing anything like that, we would be screaming our heads off about it. We would just be over the moon about it. But because it's China, though, we pretend like it doesn't exist. Polar, I used to live in Venezuela. Yeah, I mean, the United States committed mass sanctions. Even the UN agreed that what happened in Venezuela was the fault of sanctions, bud. Like, the United States is a big, large organization that has done a lot to actively try to destroy communism in the world, and that includes to the modern day. QD says, what's my opinion on the mass immigration happening in the Hungarian-Serb border? I live in Hungary. I'm starting to fear a war of religion. They recently found firearms on some of the immigrants. I mean, dude, like, okay, let's do it. This is a great opportunity to open up the Google map and actually, it always pays to look at the map, right? It always pays to look at the map. And you're taking a look at a period of I mean, it's war, dude. Like, it's war. It's crazy what happens during periods of war. And mass immigration. My internet is just absolutely in the tank these days. It's struggling to, like, load up fucking Google Maps. Are you kidding me? Like, come on. I gotta phone somebody. Anyway. So if we get to Hungary, right? You're living in Hungary, right? You got mass immigration coming in, right? From Serbia. Like, the immigration patterns, right? Very clear about what's going on. I mean, there's a reason why Europe is swinging to the far right. I don't really have anything nice or soothing to say to you here, Cutie. Like, there's major conflict happening in this region. We all know about it, right? There is still repercussions of the destruction of the Middle East by the Americans. That's still happening. You've got the major protest movements that happen in Iran, right? Like, you've got, I mean, the destruction of Libya. So, like, this is creating an immigration pattern, right? This is creating an immigration pattern. And the response, and the response to all nations, when they're put under this kind of duress, will become nationalist. And that's true across the board. Like, there's no exception there. That they all become nationalist. And Serbia, Hungary, all these places are no different, right? And so, as capitalism creates these major problems, and they are major problems that they're creating, the response is to get far-right leadership in place. You can take a look at what happened in Italy recently, right? Italy literally elected a fascist, like a straight-up black and white, like Mussolini was great, fascist. And that's just going to get more and more entrenched in the region. I wish I could tell you it wasn't going to be that way, but it is. Like, it is. Straight talk, bud. Like, and your feeling that there is going to be some kind of a conflict, I don't know if it's going to be based on a religion or if it's going to be based on one thing or the other, but this is what capitalism does. It creates these conflicts, and I think you're probably right, QT, that there is going to be a conflict, right? And that what we as communists should be calling for is de-escalation, right? We should be calling for a conversation of power along class lines, because it is in the interests of the upper class and the ruling class to make these divisions happen. That a war between people based on ethnicity or race works to the benefit of the ruling class. Because as long as you're fighting each other on those lines, you're not fighting a class war, which that's the only war the ruling class actually fights, is a class war. I'm now in Brazil, way better, isn't perfect. I mean, yeah, but Brazil isn't experiencing United States sanctions that are destroying the country, right? Like, that's straight up what's happening. And what's so funny is that because of the botching of this conflict here, and I had a great, yeah, here we go. The United States and Europe have experienced huge price increases in oil and gas, right? Because of what they've done. And who are they turning to? They're turning to Maduro. They don't have anybody else to turn to, right? The person they've been sanctioning and destroying and demonizing this whole time, well, they're turning to him and being like, hey, can we get some of that oil? And his response is very clear, like, lift these sanctions. Like, that's what's happening. Yep. Lula is president-elect. I'm happier for you now. Although Lula's Congress is still on the right, so they have a real situation. It's a very similar situation to what Biden has right now. That Biden's Congress is now on the right, and so not like he was getting a lot of shit done before. I'm Estonian, a third out of our whole population. A third, eh? That's seems aggressive. They deported all Tatar people. It's even in Russian documents. I'm embarrassing myself. Like, so we're just gonna type in Estonia, bud. Like, bud, I'm gonna tell you. I am gonna tell you, right? So let's just take your thing at face value, okay? Like, I'm not gonna destroy the entire project of communism based on what happens in Estonia, right? Population, what do we got? Population of Estonia. 1.3 million? Yeah, the whole communist project goes to shit because of something that happens in fucking Estonia. Sorry, dude. Like we're talking about literally like massive geopolitical politics here. We're talking about like people who are shooting rockets into space. We're talking about we're talking about the most powerful people going to Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island. We're talking about countries that have billions and billions of people. And the successes that they're having. We're talking about a massive historical thing that goes throughout the path of 100 years. Sorry, dude. Like, I hate to break it to you, bud. Like, I hate to break it to you. Bro, how do you know the Chinese don't do that either at their concentration camps? Drink more of that CIA Kool-Aid, eh? Just drink more of that CIA Kool-Aid, bud. That's what that is. Simple as that. Like, literally every time that talking point comes up, I'm just like, just keep on drinking, dude. Bolsonaro is better. Don't need to pay any more attention to you, bud. Bye. Don't need losers in the chat. Like, literally don't need fascists in the chat. Like, stand up, do the salute, okay? Congratulations. Communism was strong in Romania till the very end in Romania. Our communist leader, oh man, you're making me pronounce that, eh? Ceausescu. I always embarrass myself, dude, when I start doing Eastern European stuff. Kept communism strong till it was overthrown by the starving population in the 1989 revolution. I mean, like, what happens in the Eastern Bloc, right? Like, the Soviet Union recedes post-Stalin. The power center, it becomes neoliberal, dude. Like, what you're complaining about is neoliberalism. Like, there was a transition of power that happens post-Stalin. And it's really obvious. Like, Gorbachev, Khrushchev, Yeltsin, all these guys, they were very open about it. It wasn't secret. There was even big protests and big struggle in Russia itself during that period of time. Like, they're not trying to overthrow communism, right? You can't overthrow something that's already been abandoned by the ruling class. Like, and this idea that, like, we're trying to keep communism alive while paying fealty to the American system, sorry, dude, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. Like, this, the invasion of Afghanistan alone should tell us that the Soviet regime, like the post-Stalinist Soviets, had completely abandoned the idea of communism. Like, that was completely in the waste bin, right? So again, like, I just feel like you're complaining about the abandonment of communism, not communism itself. Yeah, Bolsonaro's a fascist. We don't need to have any more conversation about that. Why did the Soviet Union need to buy food from Western countries after the 80s? Because they abandoned the project of communism. Like, I don't know how many times I have to say this. Like, they literally abandoned the project. Like, it's weird. Like, it's weird that I need to say the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, and you're not getting it. It's just weird. How would a communist uprising happen in Canada when they just banned handguns? Yeah, no kidding. I'm not a big fan of that, honestly. Like, I'm not. Like, I'm a rural Manitoban. I come from Manitoba. Right? Manitoba's over here. Like, I'm from rural Manitoba. Like, I come from a gun culture. I'm not a big fan of the government banning weapons. Like, I'm not a big fan. At this stage in the game, the class consciousness isn't there. That's the hard truth, right? Like, if somebody were to say to me, like, well, you just did. Like, how would a communist uprising happen in Canada? You've got to build solidarity and class movement first. That's the truth. And it's just not there. Like, the unions are struggling to get, like, a 4% raise for their members at this point. Like, we're very pathetic. Like, pathetic is the word to use. Like we pay fealty to capitalists who are degenerate. Like, we literally do everything we can to ensure that power is concentrated in the hands of a small group of rapacious psychopaths. And if you stand up and say, like, hey, maybe pedophiles shouldn't run the country, you get, like, well, communism killed 100 million people. Like, we're very pathetic. Like, we're a pathetic, very dim-witted people. Very dim-witted people. So how will a mass protest and how will an overthrow and an uprising actually happen? Through the hard work of organization and building class consciousness. And that's essentially what we're doing here, is attempting to build class consciousness and the awareness that there are owners and there are owned, and that you are owned. That if you are not an owner, you are owned. And if you're going to celebrate that, then I think that that's really pathetic and sad. And we should be moving towards actually attempting to free ourselves from this system of capital that is not only destroying our country, but destroying the species itself. Like, climate change is real, and it's coming for us, right? And we're basically doing nothing about it. Yeah, war is America's unifying project. Broccoli cheddar rice, a pleasure to see you, bud. And I mean, but you can't unify a nation that way. You can do it for a little while, but it doesn't work in the long run. Okay, I doubt we will have an uprising until it's too late. The empire is falling. We're watching soccer. Yeah, this is how Rome fell. No one noticed they kept the game running and the war is going. Yeah, I think that's right. That there will be a balkanization. That states will begin to peel off. Provinces will begin to peel off. Like, I mean, Brexit happened, right? Brexit happened, and people pretend like it can't happen. Of course it can happen. Like, of course it can. And in my view, that's the likely path forward. I don't think that there's going to be a big communist uprising and suddenly Canada is going to be communist and the United States is going to be communist. Like, that's not how it's going to go. That as the project of abandonment, because that's the actual project that's going on in America. It's the project of wealth extraction and abandonment, right? That if you've got a project of wealth extraction and abandonment that exists in the society, which is what we have, then then eventually the abandoned people will abandon the system back, right? And that's essentially what you see with the fall of the Roman Empire, right? It's not that people leave the empire because they're like, fuck you, empire, we're going to build our own empire, but with blackjack and hookers. Like, it's that they were abandoned. That literally the Roman Empire was just like, it's too far away. We don't have administrative power. We're not going to put money into it. We're not getting anything out of it. We've gotten everything we can get out of it. So we're just going to leave. And you're already seeing that happen throughout the United States in big ways. Like, big ways. Like, there are states that have been completely abandoned. Like, you think Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi are like robust capitalist havens? Like, these places have been fucking abandoned. And once the people no longer have any wealth, places like Amazon will just leave, right? These big fucking facilities that came in to extract as much wealth as they possibly could, right? Once there's no more extraction to be done, they'll just leave. They'll just abandon them. And these people will eventually be like, oh, we've been abandoned. So I guess we're fending for ourselves now. There is no administrative power that exists in many of these states. There is no administrative power that's interested in helping out. And if you keep electing leaders and if you keep getting leaders, because the electoral system is fraudulent, but if you keep getting leaders whose strategy and whose plan is to privatize all your systems, extract as much wealth as possible, and then abandon you, well, eventually you're just going to say, like, what's the point of this federal government? What's the point of being part of this federal government? So I expect to see a larger balkanization happen. Places like Texas, places like California, they already put it on the ballot. Like, it's already there. There's something like 30 to 40% support for leaving the federal government across most states. Like, you can't just continuously abandon your citizens and then expect them to remain citizens. And that's going to happen first, in my view. That's going to happen first. That it's very, very unlikely that there's going to be like a big communist upswell of power or anything like that. That happens before that balkanization takes place. And it's very, very unlikely that the North and let me be extremely clear, like, this kind of dismantling of large empires has enormous historical precedent. Most countries that exist, like, let's take China. China's a great example. China's a 4,000-year-old civilization. It's had enormous periods of time where it's collapsed into essentially feudalism, where it's had warlords all over the place, and then it's managed to build itself back up and become the country that it is essentially right now. And that's when you have like the Ming dynasty and the Qing dynasty and these sorts of long-scale sort of dynasties, which eventually collapse over time. And they collapse for the exact same reason, which is that the leaders of the country stop attempting to unify the country. The project gets abandoned, right? That's the most common thing to happen. And it's the same thing with like the Soviet Union, right? If the project of unification gets abandoned, then the thing is abandoned, right? And the people will eventually stop participating in it in a meaningful way. So that's what I expect to see happen. What stops corruption? I believe could be natural human nature. No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong, Fox Sniffer 78. Bro, you gotta do something about this name, dude. You really do, boy. Because I like your questions. What stops corruption? Institutional power. That's the way you do it. That it's the only thing that you can actually erect and create systems of laws and systems that respond to the people. As long as the systems that you have in place are responsive to the demands and the needs of the people, then you can maneuver around that kind of stuff. It's not going to be perfect, obviously, but and the reality is, if it stops responding to the needs of the people, then the people don't need to respond to it, right? That's why I tell people all the time, like, you don't need to really obey these laws. Like, they're just threats, right? They're just threats. Like, the laws that exist, like, they're written by pedophiles and slaveholders. Like, you don't really need to follow them. They're just threats. Yeah, fascia on fascia violence already unfolding in Europe. Yeah. What do we got? Fidel Castro, this is from Isaac. Fidel Castro once said that the next war in Europe is going to be between Russia and fascists, and they're going to call it democracy. Yeah, I mean, there is something about that, dude. Like, that's why, like, celebrating, like, if Democrats beat Republicans, I'm like, oh, one fascist organization beat another fascist organization, like, whoopsie-doo and Kalamazoo, right? That's what's so embarrassing about the people who come into this chat and try to defend this system of capital. Like, the rest of the world views the United States as like a Nazi state. Like, you think the people in Afghanistan and Iraq are like, oh, thank goodness, phew, it's the Democrats that are dropping bombs on us now. Like, if you live in Africa, like, just this year, 5 African nations were couped and overthrown. Like, just this year. So, like, the rest of the world is not looking at America going like, wow, what a bastion of freedom. And, oh, well, yeah, they're struggling with that fascist period with Trump, but those Democrats are going to do it, and then we're back on track. Like, they're looking at America and being like, okay, crazy nut job. Okay, raving psychopath that comes and drops bombs on everybody. Right? Like, and if you can't come to terms with that, right? If you can't come to grips with that, then I don't think you're a very serious person. Like, America, the way America has openly been acting on the world stage is Nazi. It's Nazi level. It's fascist. Easy. It's just as bad as anything the fucking Nazis ever did. Like, they're foaming at the mouth, crazed, right? Why don't capitalism's numerous atrocities, foreclose it in the eye of liberals? Because there are atrocities. That's why, Leon. There are atrocities. That when we do it, it's fine, because there's a good reason, because it's for the greater good, right? It's like how when we were colonizing the United States, committing a genocide against the First Nations people, we said that it was to the benefit of the First Nations people. You still hear that today. That like it's to the benefit of the Libyans to overthrow their society because they're just barbarians anyway, right? That we're sending our culture to them. We're so cultured and good and pure with our manifest destiny and all this kind of shit. So we're doing them a favor, and that's something that we openly say. Like we openly say that shit. Cutie, wow, never in my life have I had a leftist give me a mature answer like this. A privilege. I'm so happy to hear that, Cutie, because that's my whole goal. That's my whole goal. There's a lot of bullshit in the world. There's a lot of bullshit in the world. The only leftists I see are on an iPhone with a Starbucks coffee in their hand. If I hear I lean to the right, I get blocked. Well, honestly, Cutie, I don't like to block people. Like, if you are coming in here and you've got basic respect, right? You're interacting with me on a one-to-one kind of a human level. You're not name calling me. You're not just shitting on me. And especially if you're not just like regurgitating the CIA bullshit as if it's complete fact. And anybody who thinks otherwise is an idiot. Then yeah, I'm gonna have a good conversation with you because everybody's in the place that they're in, right? And we can disagree. And I think you and I will disagree if you're saying that you're on the right, but that's fine. Everyone's in the place that they're at. And if you understand and you have built into your consciousness the idea that there's another human being and we can interact with one another on a one-to-one level, on a human level, then that already puts you well ahead of many people. That already puts you in a much stronger position than lots and lots of people I interact with. So to me, that's like the baseline requirement. Like, we got to be able to treat each other like human beings. Like, I'm not an NPC. That's a common thing that I think I see these days. And our society is really structured around this idea that you are the main character, right? And you are supposed to believe that you are the main character. And you're supposed to believe that the world that you're seeing through your eyes is the world. That it's not just your singular perspective, but it's literally a film that you're watching, and it has that level of stakes and importance, right? And so you can just remove humility. You can just live this highly arrogant life because you believe that you're a main character or you're the main character. And if you believe that you're the main character, then everyone around you is an NPC who exists exclusively for the benefit of you. And if the NPC does something that you don't like, they're an obstacle for you, and you can just slice them down and move on with your life because they're just an NPC, right? Like, and most of our media and most of our life and most of how we interact in the world, in this capitalist sort of structure, is designed to convince you that that's the case. The entire consumerist culture is built around the idea that you're the main character. That your decisions are the best decisions, and what you want to buy and surround yourself with and define yourself through the objects that you have around you. That's the most important thing. Defining yourself through your consumption is the most important thing. And so what that means is there's a lot of these people who live in the world who think they're the main character. And it's really sad when it's like people who are definitely not the main character think this way, right? It's really sad when that's the case. But if you are interacting with another person with respect and decency, and you acknowledge that they're another character, that you are a character, like I'm willing to say that you're a character. I'm not saying that you're an NPC. You're a character, but so am I. And so is everybody else. So are all these people on TikTok. So is everybody, right? We're all characters. It's a multiplayer game. Right? We're all experiencing a multiplayer game simultaneously together. And once you understand that, and then you also understand that we all arise from the same energy and so therefore are the same thing. That you and I are actually just aspects of the same energy that randomly generated us. Once you understand that, and then you understand that when you're talking to somebody, you're actually talking to an aspect of yourself, right? And if you're already innately doing that, if you're innately treating someone with respect and decency, then you're already like well ahead of the game. And then we can just have a conversation about the illusion that we exist in, right? Because that's what most of this is. It's just an illusion, right? It's just a temporary thing that we're all going through because the energy generated it and doesn't understand why. Like that to me is it must fundamentally be the truth. Like that whatever generated this doesn't really get why it did it. And that we're here to try to figure out what this is in the first place. But instead of that, we're going to bicker about, like, I don't know who's the better sports team, or are the what did you hear what Chloe said to Kim? Like that kind of dumb bullshit that doesn't matter at all, right? It doesn't matter at all. It's just distraction. So that's a very long-winded way, QD, of me saying you seem to be treating me with respect and decency, and so if we disagree with one another, then that's fine. That's fine. A-Box, seldom do I... Good to see you, by the way, bud. Seldom do I actually catch a live stream so late to the conversation. Oh, well, just glad you're here, bud. I think that this is one of the few spaces where people who are socially right, but economically left. To get a sense of what I mean, look at Vietnam. One has messy streets, very disorganized. I'm sorry, Box, I've lost your thread. I think this is one of the few spaces where people who are economically right, but socially left. Yeah, bro, sorry, Box. I lost the thread of what you were trying to say there, dude. My bad. Well, someone has to keep people in check to keep communism going, right? So there will always be higher up to fuck with the lower people. Both methods suck. I mean, you're essentially describing the way that communist uprisings actually happen is that the proletariat realizes and recognizes that there's just more of us. The working class is way more powerful than the elites, than, if you want to call them the elites, or the ownership class. Like, we're way more powerful. We're just disoriented and easy to confuse, right? And that confusion is built in right from day one, by the way. Like, our educational system is designed to disorient and confuse us. It's not designed to help us. It's not designed to give us the tools we need to understand what's going on in the world. Like, that's certainly not the case. And so that disorientation has taken an awful lot of time for anybody to get over and get through, right? And hopefully, eventually we get to a point where we understand that we actually have the power. We can actually do it. Yeah, Gord, I tend to agree with you. Canada won't have a communist uprising. Like, maybe in my lifetime. Like, maybe when I'm 80, there'll be something credible going on. But it won't be until at least the boomers are gone, right? There's an entire generation of people who are just kind of, like, inundated with CIA propaganda and lead. And until they're gone, I just don't think it's possible. Do you know about the starving of the Ukrainians in 1932-33? You mean the what's called the Holodomor, right? The Nazi propaganda surrounding the Holodomor? Yeah. We've opened up the Soviet archive and gone in. Capitalists have gone in. It wasn't intentional. There was a famine. Because countries have famines. America has had a famine. The Dust Bowl exists. The Irish potato famine, the Bengali famine, right? It's how countries respond to those famines that matter, right? So when the Irish potato famine happened, the British exported potatoes out of the region. When what's called the Holodomor started, the Soviets started shipping grain to Ukraine, right? Like, I mean, if you just want to buy Nazi propaganda, you can, bud. That's fine. Yeah. When the Ukrainians wanted freedom from communism, Stalin Miller, yeah, with his big giant spoon. He took his big giant spoon and personally ate all the grain himself. I don't take it seriously, dude, and neither does any academic. It's straight up Nazi propaganda. Drukovsky, yes, I want to talk to you because you seem to you have the respect, and I like that. I hear your response, and most of your ideas are right on. Although, you're making me say this name, Kiski. Good job on producing him, by the way. I had never declined his ideology, unlike the other Soviet and Eastern Bloc leaders. Me personally, I believe that the only reason why the revolution happened in the first place was the infiltration of Western culture into communist Romania. Well, and I mean, there is also the reality, dude, that, like, you can't, like, if you're surrounded and isolated and abandoned, you can't win that. Like, you just can't. Like, there's that too. And I'll be honest, like, I don't know a lot about what happened in your specific situation. That's why, like, responding to, like, Estonia, I'm responding to this is, like, I don't know everything about everything, and I'm never going to admit that that's the case. But, like, chances are just extremely good that it wasn't that he was an evil communist dictator trying to, like, he probably was just a dude who was way in over his head, who was like, I do believe in the principles of communism, but lacked the resources and the ability to do anything about it. And eventually the people were just like, well, we can't continue this way, right? And when you've got the superpower on the continent, which is Russia, right, swinging towards neoliberalism, when you've got an enormous neoliberal force here, when you've got an enormous neoliberal force here, when the winds are blowing in that direction, like what's Romania gonna do? Like really, what's Romania gonna do? So I don't know. It sounds to me like you're telling me a story of a man who ideologically wanted to continue with the project, but didn't want to accept that the project had already been abandoned, and just lacked the ability to understand that the only thing that his country could actually probably do is bend. It's just bend. It's a hard truth. It's a hard truth. Like, it's all well and good to say, like, I would love to do some communism, but if, like, CIA spies come in and blow your shit up, if no one will trade with you, right? There's another big one. Sanctions exist, right? Like, if no one will trade with you, it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what you believe, right? Like, you can get, like, take a look at Venezuela. Your country can get really fucked up. Your country can get really fucked up if people just decide to stop trading with you. That's why BRICS is so important. That's why BRICS is so important. What's going on with China right now? That China, India, Russia, Brazil, and Saudi Arabia are creating a trade alliance with one another. And that's very scary for the United States. The BRICS is very scary for the United States because it's outside of the international system. It's outside of the International Monetary Fund and the other international systems that exist throughout the world. And it allows places like Venezuela to actually trade with someone. So when the United States says, we're going to put a bunch of sanctions on Venezuela, we're going to put a bunch of sanctions on this place or the other place, well, they have another organization to turn to, and they will. And the hard truth about what the United States is going through right now, sorry I'm a little off subject with you, bud, but is that the United States is, if you sanction everybody, you're the isolated one. And that's exactly what the United States is doing. It's just sanctioning everybody, and it's going to end up being the isolated one as these countries begin to firm up these trade alliances over time. And my feeling, Drukowski, is that the story that you're telling me, like, it doesn't sound like an ideological one. It sounds more like a human story. It sounds like a country that just could not keep its feet as a tide came from underneath and swept them away. That's kind of what that sounds like to me. And it's very difficult for me to condemn the project of communism over that kind of thing. Because the sweeping away of the Soviet Union and the sweeping away of that kind of... Like, what happens in Russia post-Stalin? Like, I try to take the nicest view that I possibly can. Because I do both. I take the dim view and then I take the nice view. And usually the truth lies in between those two. And what I've come to see about the post-Soviet era is that I really do think that the like Khrushchev, Gorbachev, Yeltsin, while they were shitheads, I don't think they were very smart people, certainly not principled. I do think that their goal was to unify with Europe. I think that was the goal, and that they viewed this communist project as an impediment, that they were looking not just for their own wealth and fortune and all that, but they also were looking for a way to integrate Russia into NATO. I think that that's really the truth, that they were looking at organizations like NATO, which existed to dismantle the Soviet Union. They were looking at NATO, they were looking at the International Monetary Fund, they were looking at these organizations that were existing, these international post-World War II organizations, remembering that, like, China as a force didn't exist, that the global south was in disarray and largely destroyed, constantly being destroyed by the United States. And so Russia's choice on the world stage post-Stalin is really continue standing our ground, attempt to ally with these nations that are in poverty, that like China's like literally brushing up a war, right? Like Russia's not really in a place to foment alliances and things like this anywhere. So it really is like stand on this principle against this superpower that was untouched post-World War II and still has an industrial base, or attempt to ally with it. And I think through that process, they recognize that we can't continue with this communist project if our project is to ally with the West for our own protection. And it's only been under Putin that finally the Russians have realized, and I think Putin himself has realized, that the West will never accept Russia. It will never allow Russia to integrate. And I think the 2010 rejection of Russia's Russia applied to get into NATO and was declined in 2010. That combined with what happened in Libya and what happened in Georgia, I think all of these things have culminated to make Putin recognize that the project of being integrated into the West. And remember, at one point, Russia was part of the G8, what's now called the G7, right? Russia was the eighth in that. That project is not going to work, was going to fail, and that Russia would always end up being something of a junior partner, something of a kicking boy for the West. And I think Putin came to see that and also began to recognize and realize that there is a rising power under his during his term. There is a rising power in the world that is not the West and is not the United States, and that's China. And that's actually much more interesting for Russia because China's right fucking there, right? China's already got high-speed rail. One of the things I always like to show people, and I think it's important that people know this, the Belt and Road Initiative is an enormous project that the Chinese have been building for 20 years now. It's high-speed rail that goes from China up into Russia. And so not only are China and Russia interested in a trade agreement based on their geographical location, but they've built the infrastructure for it. And that to me is extremely important to understand about what's happening today in the modern era. And so to tie it back into you, Drakowski, and the reason why I'm being at length with you is because I'm trying to respect your position, because I don't disagree with your position, dude. I bet it was ridiculous. I really do. I bet it was ridiculous, for sure. And you would know better than I would. I'm just trying to give you a bit of color and trying to give you a wider perspective about why that might be the case, and to say that I don't think any force could have stood up to what was going on the geopolitical stage, right? It would, to me, it would be on the same level as saying, well, why didn't the Polish just defeat Hitler? That's kind of the same level of what we're talking about. Why didn't the Polish just defeat Hitler? They should have fielded more men and had a better army than them. Didn't they see Hitler coming? They should have just defeated Hitler. Well, too bad. Too bad. And it's kind of the same story with what you're telling me. Yeah, maybe he did want to stand up for communism, and maybe he was interested in doing that. Well, too bad. Too bad. There's enormous geopolitical forces going on in the world, and I'm sorry to say it, bud. Romania is not the center of it. It's what I said earlier with this Estonia thing. Romania is not the center of it. Romania is just a boat caught in the storm, right? That the real players in that are Russia and the United States, and now China, for sure. And so and that's something that I talk a lot about when I get talking about my home country of Canada. Canada is largely caught up. We have a population of 36 million. We if the United States says do something, we can't say no. We really can't. Our number one trading partner is the United States. We're in no position to say no. And that's shitty. It makes us cowards. It makes us very weak. But it essentially makes us vassals of the United States. But what are we supposed to do? Right? What are we supposed to do? And my suggestion to you when you get thinking about this fellow, and because I ask that question a lot about world leaders a lot. Well, what were they supposed to have done? And when you start asking that question, what were they supposed to have done? You begin to realize that there's very little for them to have done. That sometimes things are out of people's control. And sometimes that's just the way it goes. So, Anyway, Drakowski, I hope that gives you a little color and helps you out a little bit, bud. China has built 84 stadiums in Africa. Fantastic. All communism done during the Cold War was destabilize the Eastern Bloc. I tend to agree with that, Gort. That the Cold War was a destabilizing period in the Eastern Bloc for exactly the reasons I was just describing. Revolts happened, USSR collapsed. Yeah, I'm not defending. No, I don't think. I think that it is correct to point out that when you abandon a communist project, the way that the Soviets abandoned the communist project, that there's consequences for that, right? And for me, I take a look at that, and I don't think that that's a condemnation of communism. I think that that's a condemnation of the abandonment of communism. They took all the food, didn't import, leave them. Ukrainians, after communism, were called soldiers. Yeah. Wank, wank, wank. Nazi propaganda happening in the chat. We hot, dude. Like, this is straight up, like, Nazi propaganda. Like, it's not even CIA propaganda, but this is straight up Nazi propaganda. Liam, why would you think communism would ever work? I mean, take a look at China. Take a look at where it's working. Like, sorry, dude. Like, because it's working. That's why. That's the answer to that question. Leon, the stream rocks. Got to tune in more often. Thanks, bud. Appreciate that. Tell everybody you know. Send it around. No country that has communism ever worked except China, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, North Korea. The Soviets defeated the Nazis. Were the first people into space. Libya, when it was attempting to move towards communism, was literally the strongest economy on the continent before they created a slave society out of it. And they, in that state, is the CIA in the United States. Like, if you don't know anything about the subject, bud, you can say whatever you like. That's the hard truth, right? And the other thing I like to say is, oh yeah, you're right, bud. Communism has never been successful. It's never successfully built Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island. It's never successfully engaged a war in literally every country and every continent. It's never managed to overthrow like 5 African countries this year. Like, you're right, dude. It's not successful at doing American imperialism, so it's inferior. You're right. What Contexto? How's that for a name? Contexto. Good to see you, bud. What's your opinion about the future of Brazil? I mean, they're heading in the right direction with Lula. Lula's just smarter, frankly. The reason why he struggles to really get the impact in is because the capitalists don't want him. And they don't want to work with him. They don't want to implement his stuff. That's what kind of kept him and Dilma down during their period, is that the capitalists in Brazil don't want socialism. They don't care if the poor people in their country suffer. They don't care. Right? Just take a look at Bolsonaro. Like, he didn't give a shit. He didn't care at all. And there are people who agree with Bolsonaro, obviously, right? So so one hopes that here's the difference, though, between what happened last time Lula was in and now. That last time Lula was in, there wasn't the same amount of socialist leadership throughout the rest of South America. That right now in Chile, Bolivia, I believe Colombia, Venezuela, right? All throughout Uruguay, all throughout South America right now, there's been, like, very famously, the Chilean communists took power and said, neoliberalism was born in Chile, it will die in Chile. Like, that's a very profound statement for a country to make about itself. And so now Lula is coming in, and that exists, and there's this spirit of federalization or federalization that exists throughout South America now that didn't exist previously. That a lot of these socialist nations are beginning to say, we gotta get together and actually create federated systems, create institutional power, because we know the United States is coming for us. We know that the CIA is going to try to overthrow us and destroy us. We have to join ranks with one another. We have to do it. And now Lula is coming in, and if Lula can get involved with the leadership that's throughout South America, and they can successfully create a federated system that is more socialist in its outlook, that would be a huge, huge deal for South America. That would be a massive, massive, massive first step. Good opportunities to say, hit all the bells, hit all the whistles, like, share, subscribe, do all the things, give the diamonds, all that kind of stuff. Thanks, guys. We got 4.2 thousand likes on TikTok. Thanks, guys, so much. I appreciate it. If you want to have an adult conversation like we're having, please come over to YouTube. Leave the Ronnie shit in TikTok, please. Socialist corruption. Some socialist bureaucrat makes 10 times the amount of a worker and lives in an extra large apartment. Capitalist corruption. Capitalist makes 10,000 more than a middling worker and has private pedo islands. Yeah, that's a good way of saying it, Compton. Like, no one's denying that there's no corruption in these places, but the scale of the corruption is so much different. Like, it's so much different. Like, I've never seen a communist country fucking literally buy an island to put children on it so that they can have sex with them. Like, that's some uniquely capitalist shit right there. That's something. QT, haha, of course, I always try to be respectful to everyone, especially elderly people I respect. Look at you, bud. Yeah, you're way ahead of the game, dude. Like, you're doing well. Like, if you and I have a disagreement, I suspect that it'll be the two of us trying to learn something from one another. That's a beautiful sentiment, bud. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, Ligon Dizzy responding to this Nazi propaganda. Right, so when communists kill people, it's on accident. No, communists killed Nazis on purpose. For sure they did. And the kulaks, which were essentially Confederates, right? Like, in terms of their position and their social position. Like, no, when Soviets kill Nazis, they do it on purpose, dude. Like, we got that in there. Well, that's an immediate. That makes that easy. Not surprised to see it, bud. Like, when you're that brain dead, right? Yeah, no, I know all about this contexto. People on TikTok calling me McNutt, who is a guy who did a live, took his own life, and he looked like you. No, but what's so funny is that he doesn't. Like, that's the funniest part about it. He has glasses and a beard. Like, that's what makes it so embarrassing. Like, it's super, super embarrassing. I mean, if that's what's happening, it's helping me. So I consider if Ronnie McNutt's death, and I know nothing about this guy, like literally zero. I know that he existed, he had a beard and glasses, and he killed himself the day I started live streaming. And so if that energy is carrying into this stream and giving me these numbers and getting me any amount of money and letting me spread the word of communism, then all blessings to Ronnie McNutt. May he rest in peace. I hope he's up there playing basketball with Jesus Christ. Like, I think that what's happening, I think the people who are doing it are despicable. That by itself is worth ignoring someone's entire ethos and opinion. That if someone comes in here and does that Ronnie McNutt stuff, they're gone. If someone comes in here and spreads the Nazi propaganda like WeHot and then decides to end with that Ronnie McNutt stuff, you can safely ignore them. Because they think that they are the main character, and they think that a guy like Ronnie McNutt was an NPC. When the truth is that it's likely that Ronnie McNutt was going through some real shit, was experiencing a real thing. And if you learned anything about this guy, his life would probably break your heart. Would probably break your heart. And I think that what people are doing with the flowers and the emotes and all that kind of stuff is disgusting. And if those people think that they should be taken seriously as thinkers or speakers, then they really are very dim-witted. Very, very dim-witted. That the simple act of mocking someone because they committed suicide, because they, like, it is somewhat legendary given the way that he did it. But to come into certainly my stream, because I just happen to have a beard and glasses and be like Ronnie lives and all that kind of stuff, I think it's disgusting. And an indictment of our culture. Like, just an absolute indictment of our culture. The idea that people can do that, and it can build a zeitgeist, and that people can be like, ha 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 about it. Right? No wonder we're ruled by pedophiles and literal Nazi collaborators. Like, no wonder. QT, if we fight against capitalism, Stalinism, that wants to destroy all that is Christian, traditional, or non-profitable, then we should be able to succeed and destroy these beasts. I will fight until I can live under an acceptable system, and I think that is traditionalist, religious, economically socialist, and nationalistic. You're a great guy to talk to politics about, to be honest. Yeah, I appreciate that, QT. I appreciate that, bud. Yeah, I can tell just by that statement that we would have disagreements, but I think that they are like disagreements that I'd have with like my uncle or my dad, right? Like, it's, some people come on here and they're like the WeHot and they're just talking Nazi propaganda shit, right? So I don't have a traditionalist outlook. I'll be as upfront as I can with you about that, QT. Like I think that if we actually had a genuine conversation about my views about family, sex, those sorts of things, you would find that I am the opposite of a traditionalist. I'm very, like, we have a very repressed society. We're very repressed as a people, and we could be much more open than we are. But that's a talk for another day. Drakovsky. I gotta go. Thanks for reading my comment about Romania. If you want to read a book about its revolution, please read I Must Betray You. Good night, mate. By the way, when's your next stream? Drakovsky, you're probably gone already, dude. But I stream Monday through Thursday, 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I hope to see you again, bud. I appreciate your recommendation. I'm always looking for good stuff to read. Liam, communism is a failed system, except all the times it didn't. Broccoli cheddar rice. What do you say when someone says, I don't judge anyone by their politics? I mean, it sort of depends, doesn't it? Like, I find that that's a very centrist thing to say. Like, that's a very, like, politics doesn't matter to me kind of statement, right? It's all well and good to say I don't judge anybody by my politics if the politics doesn't affect you. Or if it's just latently benefiting you, right? If it doesn't matter where the wind blows, right? Like, if somebody makes $100,000 a year and doesn't pay any attention to the news and all that kind of stuff, says something like that, it's like, yeah, like, you, who like... If you're a landlord and you own a bunch of properties, like, yeah, like, but like there is such a thing as, like, if you're a Nazi, yeah, I judge you by your politics. I for sure judge you by your politics. Will ZQX ever heard the millions of Stalin and other communist leaders Stalin? Yeah, I heard it from the CIA and Nazis, dude. Absolutely, I've heard that. Like, I love that people come in here and think that I haven't heard this shit, dude. Right? I love it. I just love that people come in here and they're like, they pretend as though that I haven't heard that shit. Obviously, dude. Like, I unlike you, I understand what the CIA is, and I understand what Nazi propaganda is, right? Like, that's my suggestion to you, dude. Like, learn more about the CIA, learn more about the history of the CIA. It's very open, it's easy to find, right? Learn about Operation Paperclip, learn about Operation Mongoose, learn about Operation Mockingbird, right? Like, these are very easy things to discover and find. But if you're just going to come on here and regurgitate CIA bullshit and pretend as though I don't know anything about it, then I don't know, dude. Like, pretty basic. Yeah, and millions slaughtered. You mean Nazis? Is that what we're talking about? Flop of shorts with a check mark, no less. What? Flop of shorts? I don't know. I don't understand this. How you did this? Good for you, though. Appreciate it. You should mute the TikTok chat. Just check. I don't know. I feel like the TikTok chat, being the disaster that it is, drives the intelligent people to me. Right? I've thought about that. I could mute this, but like, why? Right? I feel like if there are people actually interested in actually attempting to have an actual conversation on this TikTok app, they should get off that and they should get onto YouTube, because I don't think I don't pay any attention to this. This is just the kids, as far as I'm concerned. So if you're an adult trying to have an adult conversation about adult things and you want to get serious about that, you come on over to YouTube. Maybe consider donating to my Patreon. That's in the description on YouTube. Right? That gets you into the Discord. You can continue the project from there. And so I consider this to be a benefit to me. Like, let the garbage live where the garbage lives, right? Do you recognize Kosovo as a country? My experience with Kosovo, I mean, like the bombing of Kosovo, it's a complete fucking tragedy that happens. This is Yugoslavia, the destruction of this. Like, another moment when NATO really overstepped its bounds and went well outside of its purview of, like, being anti-Soviet. Well, then why are you destroying fucking... Anyway. Yeah, edgy 15-year-olds who think suicide is funny, nothing new. Yeah, but it's just so great. Like, they've given me this perfect excuse to just ignore them, right? Like, you're just not a serious person. That's it. Like, that, and I agree with you. It's like 15-year-olds who think suicide is funny and edgy and all that kind of stuff, right? But it doesn't mean I need to take them seriously as people, right? Big Man Harris. Big Man Harris. I like that name, man. Hey, I'm pretty new. Wanted to ask if communism is good, what's bad about capitalism? Thank you for reading. Dude, Big Man Harris. My number one thing, bud, like the thing that really tipped me over the edge was the Jeffrey Epstein sex scandal. That's how you know your society can't be reformed. That's how you know the society's over. Like, it's over. It's producing islands where people put children on in order to rape systemically. Donald Trump went there. Clinton went there. Former presidents of the fucking goddamn United States went to that island. Bill Gates went to that island, right? Many, many billionaires and multimillionaires went to that island. Like, that's it for me, dude. Like, you cannot recover from that. You don't just get to go, oopsie, can we just do some piecemeal reform? No, it's over, dude. Like, your system cannot be reformed if that's the outcomes that it's making. And if you don't take that seriously, then I don't take you seriously. And the other side of it is just the endless, godless wars. Just the forget about World War I and World War II, which were capitalist wars that ended with nuclear bombardments, right? Like, even in the modern era, the invasion of Iraq, the invasion of Afghanistan, right? The genocide of the Palestinians, the genocide of the Yemeni, the fucking invasion of Syria, Somalia, Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia, right? The destruction of Libya, bro. The destruction of Libya. Like, if Libya was the strongest economy, turning into an egalitarian country with plans to move into being a robust democracy, and they just fucking overthrew it and killed the leadership, killed Gaddafi, right? And now it's literally got open air slave trade in Libya still. Like, nah, bro. Like, America's imperialism is not sea level. Like, it's not sea level, dude. And then if you want to swing away from that, like, if you don't care about any of that, if you don't care that you're the Nazis on the world stage, right? Take a look at what's going on domestically. It's a project of extraction and abandonment run by the stupidest people in the country, right? The United States took its manufacturing base and gave it to China. That's the stupidest goddamn thing a country may have ever done in the history of the world. You understand? Like, do you understand how fucking stupid that is? Like, sorry, big man, I gotta come down from this. This isn't directed at you, bud. I'm just angry about this. Because it's so fucking goddamn stupid that the United States, while saying, this is more efficient, this is efficiency, and we're building profit for ourselves, and so it's a good thing, absolutely, took their fucking manufacturing base, and without commentary from any military people, being like, this seems like an enormous national security issue, took their manufacturing base and gave it to China, and are now sitting there going, oh, why is China doing so well? Why is China doing so... Why do you think they're doing so well? You gave them your manufacturing base, you dumb fucking idiots. Like, imagine you're playing a video game. Something like Civilization or The Sims or something. And you spend all your time and resources building industrial zones. And you industrialize everything. You put in industry everywhere. And then over a period of like 100 turns, you rip all of that out and send it over here to your enemy or to another nation. What the fuck do you think is gonna fucking happen? And so you've got a project of extraction and then abandonment. And where are they abandoning? Where are they going? Jeffrey Epstein's fucking pedophile island. That's where they're going. Like, these people are stupid, degenerate, and evil. And it's obvious, bro. Like, it's extremely, extremely obvious. I'm trying to learn about the communist regime and what it kind of brings. I mean, I think the wisest thing that has ever been said about the project of communism comes out of modern day China. China calls itself socialist with Chinese characteristics, with the goal of getting itself into communism, because communism is like, that's the vision, right? That's the thing. When people say, no, communism's never been achieved, it's like, yeah, we know. Like, we know it's a massive project. It's an enormous project, an intergenerational project that'll take like 7 generations to get to. You don't just flip a switch and get to it. And the Chinese said, and very wisely, if you ask me, that it's up to every nation to find their own way. That they call it socialism with Chinese characteristics, because they want to explicitly put into their dogma and into their doctrine a non-fundamentalism. That if another country begins to pursue socialism or communism in a way that is different from the way the Chinese have done it, then that's fine. Because every single country in every single place has a different history, has different material conditions, is operating from a different place, has a different culture. What matters is the desire to move towards communism. That's what matters the most. And so when you're doing, and another thing, Big Man Harris, I think the best thing that you can do for yourself is just accept that the people who have been attempting to build communism have been at war with an empire, right? And if you don't accept that, then you're always going to end up demonizing these people in these places. Like, the United States Empire has been destroying countries. Like, the Vietnam War was real, right? Laos, Cambodia were real. These were real wars against real people, right? And if you ignore that and just pretend as though, oh, communism's a blah, 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 then you're never going to get anywhere, bud. You're never, ever, ever going to get anywhere. When someone says which communist countries aren't successful, you name China, Laos, Vietnam as examples, you realize these are ethno-states? Bro, no, they're not. Like, dude, come on. Like, like, yikes. Just yikes, dude. Like, that's some xenophobic shit right there. If something breaks your heart, then capitalists will try to make money off it. Exactly, grinning. Good to see you, bud. Big Man Harris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Ronnie McNutt was actually a war vet, fought for his country. I think I've heard that. Yeah, big man. I don't like people bringing this Ronnie McNutt stuff in here, dude. But you're doing it with some decency, so I'm willing to talk about it. I have heard that. I've done literally no research on this guy, so like if he was a war vet, fought for his country, like he's just another iteration of this, right? That there's lots of guys who go overseas thinking that war is going to be like a video game, right? Like these idiotic 15-year-old kids in the TikTok chat, right? Who go to war thinking that it's going to be like their stupid video games, their dumb Call of Duty and all this kind of trash garbage, and it's not. It's not like that at all. That it's visceral and dingy and grotesque and horrifying, right? Like these Call of Duty games are like a fucking international war crime by their very existence because of the glorification and the cleansing of war that they achieve. That all of these dumb fucking kids who play Call of Duty and are like, yeah, I'm gonna go join the military and like, yeah, so they experience the trauma of what war actually is, the horror of it, the existential terror that comes with it, and then they come home only to realize that they were never the good guys. That the United States military is a Nazi force. They are Nazis, not only ideologically but through their actions. And the existential horror and the terror of it, they have no support systems. And then on top of that, they're abandoned by the state. Like, the veterans are fucking abandoned by the state. And so, yeah, Ronnie McNutt's story is really common. Ronnie McNutt's story is really common. Right? And the idea that it's happening, and it's very similar to the mass shootings that happen. Like, it's like we've lost the capacity to even have empathy for these things any longer. Right? So I find it to be a very sad story. And Americans seem to be fine with it. Seems to be the truth. They just seem to be fine with it. That, like, yeah, so what if 100,000 veterans killed themselves last year? Like, Who cares? I got my Bugatti. That's what Americans seem to really care about. Yeah, Ligon Dizzy, I knew you were gonna do it, dude. Like they literally aren't. I don't. Western projections you've listened to, they literally treat their minority ethnic groups better than the United States treats theirs. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Stalin was a Nazi. That's the dumbest shit I've read today, and I've read a lot of dumb shit today, dude. Uh oh. Uh oh. Uh oh. Huh. That's odd. Oh well.